Imagine, just for a moment, that an artist approached you on the street and offered to give you a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Be a miniature scale, but fine quality, in durable metal, and not only a portrait, but on the back side of that piece, an image that reflects the natural world. Again, high quality with fine lettering accompanying the portrait and the image. With this, you have an object that reminds you of the head of state. You have an object that recalls fauna and flora from, well, your home and native land. And with this, imagine that even if you tire of this portrait, you are guaranteed to be able to exchange it for maybe 4, 10, or even 20 more portraits. And even better than that, at any given time, you could exchange it for coffee if you want. Well, maybe half a coffee. Okay, maybe 1/4 of a coffee, but infinitely exchangeable. And now imagine that the object would cost only $1. So much gets packed into coinage that we often fail to reflect upon its many facets, and particularly all of the decisions that go into the design and manufacture of coinage. In addition to material issues such as the quantity and the type of material used to produce them, there are administrative decisions, cultural decisions, and artistic decisions that govern what appears on our coinage. Contemporary coinage often contains a portrait with a head of state, either past or present, on the obverse, the head's side, and a set of images that more often than not reflect some part of natural world, or perhaps even national character on the reverse, on the tail's side. So how and why did this tradition begin, and what are the elements that have made it continue all the way up till present day? To function as instruments of exchange, coins need to indicate the issuing authority behind them and identify the community for which they are legal tender. Today, this is done both visually in writing with words like Canada or Bank of Canada, or done with imagery, including the head of state and images that reflect the natural landscape of the community. The style of the portrait, the size and placement of the words surrounding them, and those secondary images, those smaller images, all contribute to defining the community of users. These are also artistic choices that ultimately derive from mediation between political authorities, mint officials, and artists. The push-pull relationship between issuing authority and the community varied from familiar and accurate reflections of a culture group to propagandistic portraits of the ruler, two sides of the same coin, so to speak. On the whole, types changed relatively infrequently, which is done purposefully because their recognizability was part of their value and part of their ability to speak for the community. And in this case, usually we're talking about a nation. And with this, it was integral for coins to be recognized to function as monetary instruments. Say, if we don't recognize the coin, we don't recognize what that object is, we're going to be reluctant to exchange it for our goods or our services. These functions should not undercut the fact that coins are finished artistic products and are the result of artistic agency. In our time today, I want to consider the assertiveness on both the part of the artist and the authority, and hope to demonstrate that little has changed across the millennia from Greek antiquity to today. And to do this, I will draw on as many coins from the Bruce Brace coin collection here at the McMaster Museum of Art as I can, and I'm going to supplement it with some coins found elsewhere. A coin is a unit of currency made of metal that conforms to a standard and bears a design. The earliest coins were made of electrum, a natural occurring alloy of gold and silver, and were produced in Asia Minor shortly before 600 BC. Coinage was adopted by Greek cities by the midpoint of the 6th century BCE, that's right around 550 BCE, led by productions including Athens, Aegina, and Corinth. So from Asia Minor with first electrum coins to silver the Greeks coming in contact with the Lydians soon adopted the practice, and one of the first Greek cities was Aegina, and this is a depiction of a turtle from Aegina, which is actually on display just across the gallery from us. The adoption of coinage was rapid and widespread, resulting in that the majority of Greek cities issued coins by 500 BC, although it should be noted that not all Greek cities issued coins. Gold and silver bullion, the raw materials, have been used as a medium for exchange prior to, and even continued to be used after, the development of coinage. Practices in the Near East saw silver weighed out on a scale as currency with standard units of weight that included the mina and the shekel. The precious metals fulfilled the principal functionality of money on the basis of their intrinsic value, and in doing so both facilitated exchange and permitted the storage of wealth. If the concept of monetary instruments predates the advent of coinage, what were the benefits to coinage? Why stamp them into small circular shapes and impress images upon them? The image served as an indicator of the origin and as a guarantee of value, or at least as a guarantee of redeemability by the issuing authority. It effectively stabilized the value of the precious metal, and when struck in standard denominations, eliminated the need for weighing out bullion. So the salient aspect of coinage lies with the assurance of the issuer of the value of the lump of silver, gold, electrum, or bronze. And the image then is an essential aspect of coinage as it visually represents the guarantor behind the coin itself. Coins can be viewed as art of the state or of the city, if we're talking about the Greek world, as a medium through which messages were promoted to its citizens. Greek types commonly reflect cults or foundation myths, or maybe the city's economy. Roman practices transitioned from civic deities to deeds of statesmen, and finally to emperors who placed their own portraits on coinage, often accompanied by images that promoted their own activities or perhaps military victories. Contemporary coinage continues many of these traditions. Necessarily, there's a mediation between authorities and artists, as the vision of the polis must align with that of the physical manifestations. So with this, please allow me to tangent a little bit into minting practices in the Greek world, but I promise we'll get back to more contemporary topics soon. In the Greek world, the right to mint was usually reserved for the polis, that is the Greek city-state, and correspondingly, it is frequently the single origin of coins flowing from that community. That is, there weren't private individuals making their own coins to compete with the official ones. In Athens, the assembly or ecclesia had final authority for financial matters on the city. And as in most cases, they would have approved recommendations coming from the city council or the boule. The boule had the authority to organize the transfer of funds between accounts and various treasuries within the city, and would have made proposals regarding new taxes and changes in coin production. By the end of the 5th century BC, it is clear that the ecclesia voted on the minting of any new series of coins, and this voting right included the capacity to introduce new denominations and new coin types, new images on the coins. These offices effectively shaped the use of coinage in their city and for their economy. The minting of a large quantity of large denominational coins, such as the tetradrachms, would facilitate long-term storage of wealth and capital formation, while the choice to mint smaller denominations expedited small daily transactions. We have a question of for whom are they making these decisions, to serve the 1%ers or the rest of the community? Minting at both ends of the spectrum or across the entire spectrum certainly would have benefited the city as a whole. In Athens, we know that the mint or the agrokopion, was overseen by a board of epistatae, or supervisors, administrators, who were responsible for its operation. The degree of autonomy of the board is not entirely certain, but we know that they reported to the boulé, who reported to the ecclesia, to the council. And it's reasonable to consider that the board contracted with engravers and other laborers, perhaps workshops, to successfully carry out the production. Their role can be compared to the role of the Roman office of the tres viri monetales, the three-person committee for striking bronze, silver, and gold, as its name in Latin implies. Here, the Roman officers might have had a little bit more leeway in terms of deciding types, while it seems the epistatae were hesitant to introduce variations or deviations from well-established practices. The mint itself, and we know for cities like Athens there was an active body functioning as the mint. The operation of the mint extended from melting the silver to casting the blanks, the discs of metal that would again get struck for the finished product. In this way, coins were produced individually by hand. Each disc was stamped between two discs, and with this the image is impressed on both sides. The dies used for striking coins were made of hardened bronze or sometimes iron. Very few of them survive today. We don't have a lot of archaeological evidence for them, but looking at wear patterns on the dies, it can be reconstructed that one die could produce up to 20,000 coins. Now, perhaps the median number was lower, and I would argue for probably half of that. But we can imagine these are tools designed to produce coins in vast quantities. The upper or reverse die tended to have a shorter life than the lower or reverse die, since they received the impact of the blow from the hammer directly. At a bare minimum, the mint required a small team responsible for melting, casting, and then eventually striking the coins with the hammers on the dies. The operation in Athens may have required fewer than 100 people, and impossibly as few as 20 to 30. At the peak of its power, and say in the middle years of the 5th century, about 450 BCE, Athens may have used as many as 1,800 dies for the obverse side, and likely a greater number of dies for the reverse. Now, let's use that estimate of about 20,000 coins per die. The mint may have consumed as many as 450 obverse dies each year, as the output is estimated between 1 and 9 million coins per year at Athens' peak of prosperity. Consuming more than 450 dies a year, we see a rhythm, if they're being struck regularly, of at least one die per day, which means that the mint must have had a constant need for new dies, and the epistatae must have had established practices to procure them in a timely fashion, which means having ongoing contracts or relationships with workshops and engravers. Now, I'm going to make a bit of a jump without giving a lot of supporting evidence, but we can be relatively certain that the mint took about 2% of the output as their fees to pay the cost of operations. Now, if we think about an output of, say, 1 million 1 drachma coins a year, 2% would be about 20,000 drachms. If we used 1,000 dies a year, say 450 for obverse, 550 for reverse, it can be estimated that each die would be valued at just under 20 drachms. Now, just for a scale of things, 1 drachma is about 1 day's wage, which is not to say that it took 20 days to carve each die, but each workshop must have been paid about 20 days labor to produce the die. And these are rough estimates, but not out of line with prices for other forms of Greek art, and an arrangement that shows with the great output, there must have been workshops specializing in die cutting and ready to supply the city when the call came. The relationship between the epistatai, the overseers, and the die engravers is not entirely clear. Little is known about die engravers from antiquity in general, as they escape the notice of authors or any historians, but we do see indications of the importance of die engravers that came with a series of signed dies that appeared towards the end of the 5th century BC. So while in Athens, we can trace a development basically in terms of style from archaic to classical to late classical, the artists remain anonymous. We don't have indications of who carried out the work, and we can imagine that with a recognized prototype, we don't necessarily see a master-pupil sort of relationship continuing through, but it could even be competing unaffiliated groups who produce Athena and the owl in similar forms. Going to the end of the 5th century and moving from Athens to Sicily, we have an interesting phenomenon of an expression of assertiveness among die engravers, and that comes with a series of dies that include the name of the engravers themselves. See, on the obverse side, the Greek letters, 2 letters, epsilon, upsilon, an abbreviation for a certain engraver, Eumenes. His name appears both on the obverse and the reverse, so we can see in both dies, 2 sides of the coin produced by the single individual. Euenetos, a contemporary, Euenetos, contemporary, signed the obverse of one coin. And I know it's a little rough here, but it appears in a plaque held by a Nike figure. Euenetos must have been working with Eumenes, who signed the reverse die. Yet another team of engravers is known from Syracuse about the same period. Youth epsilon upsilon theta abbreviates the name on the reverse, and a certain Phrygilos sign just below the portrait on the obverse here. A particularly fascinating example comes from a die engraver named Kimon, who signs his name in miniature on the headband of the figure on the obverse, a water nymph named Aretusa. And Aretusa's name appears on the coin, so we have both the figure named and the engraver named here. With this coin, we see another trace of assertiveness coming from the workshops. In Sicily, 2 symbols occur frequently on coinage. One is the ear of grain here on the exerg. All right, let me go back. And the second is the dolphin, also found here on the exerg. The ear of grain and the dolphin have been interpreted as symbols of individual workshops, sort of the logo of the workshop. And with this, we can reconstruct a little bit of the organization of labor. It seems that at Syracuse there might not have been an official board of minters, they might not have had the agrokopion, the mint office and epistatae to oversee it, but outsourced the entire production from procuring the silver to carving the dies, to striking the coins, and then returning them to the city with a certain portion kept for their troubles, a certain portion retained by that workshop. With this, we see a model of work that is more independent than the oversight at Athens, and perhaps appropriate for a city that didn't quite have millions of coins produced. What is interesting is that we can see this system of outsourcing develop and grow with this moment of assertiveness in the hands of the artists. We can imagine that, again, the workshops probably took somewhere around 2% of the output for their troubles, but we can imagine that perhaps the choice for the commission, the decision to commit to Kimon or to Eumenes, wasn't based on price alone, but may have factored in things like the prestige of the engravers, the reception of the coins by the audience, that is, by the community that uses them. And with this, we see an example that, at least in Syracuse, there was esteem for the artists, and that the artists reciprocated being gratified, having their work promoted through this official instrument. So a real symbiotic relationship. In the modern period, die engravers generally don't get enough credit for their work, and only seldom do they step out of obscurity. Perhaps the most notable exception came under US President Theodore Roosevelt, who in 1904 decried that American currency was artistically atrocious and hideous. He sought to replace it with coinage that he saw, quote unquote, like the Greeks. And to this end, he commissioned the well-known sculptor Augustus Saint Gaudens and developed a new set of coins. The result is the so-called double eagle, the $20 gold coin. The nomenclature is a bit like the loonie and the toonie, that there was a $10 coin, and the 20 is not one, but two eagles, the double eagle. As an artist with a reputation, a body of work, Saint Gaudens was unrelenting in his reaction to the call. He produced a coin called the ultra high relief, which is bold enough to show detail and moves a few millimeters off the surface of the coin, commensurate with the standard of work that he had done, but soon found that the coins didn't function well. They were so high in relief that they couldn't stack properly, and the mint masters saw they were unfit for circulation. In the end, only 24 of these types were struck. Each one of them required 9 passes from a hydraulic press that deployed a total force of 172 tons. Eventually, a compromise was made, and a second version, a high relief, was created. And this required only 8 passes of the hydraulic press, and saw a production of about 12,000 before they were finally recognized to be impractical. And the final product was a low relief coin that was minted from 1907 to 1933. We can imagine the sculptor looking back to coins of Greek antiquity, and embodying neoclassical style for a contemporary audience. We're not looking at Athena, but Lady Liberty, and if there's some continuity, surely that is the desired intent upon the part of the artist. We actually have one coin here in the collection and on display that contains the name of the artist. It's a 2 franc coin from 1870 and bears the name of the engraver E.A. Houdin. And with this, we can put an example here in a tradition that goes back to the 5th century. Ideally, types selected would reflect the identity of the community that used them. For some Greek cities, that meant choosing a patron deity, but could also include images significant to their history, mytho-history, geography, or economy. The local hero, Bellerophon, tamed the wild Pegasus at Corinth, and the result is that Bellerophon was recognized as a local hero, but it's Pegasus, maybe the more recognizable beast from Greek myth, that became a fixture on the coinage of Corinth. At Gela, the unusual and fantastic creature of a bull with a human head was meant to be read as a river god, a sort of personification coming in the form of a human head, but representative of the natural force, that unbridled flow of the river gets manifest in the form of the bull. So that this hybrid creature reflects an element from the local geography, here representing the river Galos, which was home to the Greek city Gela. And both the Corinthian type, the Geloan type, are on display. One more example, at Taros, modern Taranto, on the heel of Italy, the foundation myth includes the voyage to the site by the eponymous founder Taros, who was helped ashore by friendly dolphins, and Taros riding the dolphin appears on the coin. So seeing this, we see a national character, we see a shared history, and something that creates unity, creates a community membership. And elsewhere in the Greek world, Argos was home to a sanctuary of Apollo the wolf killer, and the wolf appears as a reminder of that principal cult. An interesting example comes from northwestern Greece, the Epirot Republic. This is a federal coinage, sort of the ancient counterpart to the euro, where a number of states got together and had common coinage. They have a name of their federation written on the reverse with a thunderbolt and a portrait of Zeus on the obverse. The bolt is related to Zeus. Zeus actually has a sanctuary in the territory, so we can see something that is regional, and with the name it clearly identifies not just one city, but the group of cities that recognize it. I can't resist showing a slide from Metaponto. Today, visiting the territory, you see these amber waves of grain, this golden harvest. In antiquity, just like today, this was an important staple in the economy, and so closely identified with the economic might of the city that it was chosen as the coin type, and we have a coin from Metaponto in the collection as well. Just other reflections of community that appear on coins on display. The city of Aspendos in what is today Turkey in the 4th century produced coins with athletic events that they were famous for and promoted. So wrestlers appear on the obverse, a slinger appears on the reverse. And again, an example of continuity, this name type of national character appears even in the modern period A $1 coin from Sweden dated to 1716 shows Mother Svea, the personification of the nation, on the reverse here in glorious classical style. So again, tied back to long-standing traditions. The obverse of the coin in particular became a form for conveying the issuing authority. Greek cities traditionally placed a portrait of a goddess or a god on the obverse, and with that metaphorically transferred the political authority of the issuing body to the divine authority of the medieval, of the immortal being above, The patron deity of Athens, Athena, appears on coins of the city and is a staple across centuries. The reverse of the coin contains one of Athena's attributes, the owl, with familiar lettering Athe, abbreviation for Athens. But the same concept can be seen elsewhere from Phoenician Tyre. The Phoenician god Melkarth appears on the obverse. And the Macedonian mint of Alexander the Great featured Heracles on the obverse and Zeus on the reverse. We can take these images as, yes, reflections of Greek religion and Greek culture, but I think in this case, the choice is intentional, and there's some agency on the part of the authority that both of these images are thinly veiled references to Alexander himself. Alexander considered himself the son of Zeus, and Heracles, the Greek hero, began his life as a mortal, became an immortal. If Alexander wanted to be seen associated with either of these two, it's purely intentional, and we're getting the desired effect. Rulers appear quite frequently. Starting all the way back in the 6th century with Persian kings, their image appeared sometimes as an archer. And then as we move into the Roman imperial period, the emperor was standard on the obverse. And with this, the balance between authority and community gets reconsidered. The coinage quickly became a medium for dissemination of imperial messages and served to reinforce and even legitimize rule. With this tradition that starts in earnest with the Roman imperial period, we can draw a through line through connecting most of Western coinage, starting with Augustus, going through examples such as the Parthian king Gotarzes II, the emperor Maximinus II Daza, King Vasudeva of the Kushan dynasty, modern Afghanistan, the Byzantine emperor Phocas, coming all the way to Queen Victoria and even to Queen Elizabeth that we saw a minute ago. All of these are presently on display adjacent to us. Portraiture tied into a longer artistic tradition with neoclassical styles that remain prominent throughout the modern period. Attributes such as the cornucopia and the wreath, first utilized on ancient coins, appear frequently and even create sort of visual language of coinage moving forward. As coin types offered a significant medium that was known and used widely by a community, the images could vary from an accurate reflection to an aspiration, to the promotion of a personality, or even to the imposition of rule. In this way, coinage could function as an instrument of colonial domination and present portraiture, language, and imagery of a foreign power arriving at a previously unincorporated territory. We see this in the Roman period, but we have some fascinating examples of this phenomenon in the modern period. On display, we have a 1/4 guilder minted in Utrecht in 1857. This circulated in Indonesia and has a denomination written in the Latin alphabet, 1/4 G, 1/4 guilder, an abbreviation for Netherlands, and then in local scripts and it's in the local script indicated as 1/4 rupee. So 2 different names for the standard denomination. A 1 cent coin from the British North Borneo Company from 1888. It goes even further with depictions of men in indigenous dress holding a crest. So we can see iconography coming in again through a long-standing tradition, arriving in Britain, and here being imposed in Borneo. The crest is held by 2 indigenous men, both of them holding tools, and we can see, well, we can even feel the clash between the intent of the engraver and the authority and the community in which these would circulate. And the wreath on the reverse looks back to that classical tradition. From the British Strait settlement in Malaysia, a bronze halfpenny presents Queen Victoria, again in much the same way that we would find her if we were looking at coins from London, and bringing in rule to remote locations distant from the source of the coins themselves. And Canada is not exempt from this. A Quebec bank token from 1852, a halfpenny, again relies on classical styles with the cornucopia, a draped figure that appears like a Roman deity. But here in the context of this continent, with a schooner sailing in, and here a Canadian provincial in warm weather gear. The instruments, the infrastructure, the devices to obtain and retain rule come in even with imagery and objects like this. I want to end on a more positive note, although we can say that there's certainly a relationship between this coin from 1852 and our present coins. But let me land this plane by thinking positively and recall that these images of power are not the only option for coinage. And in recent years, we've seen community voices having greater sway in the selection of images, and really participating in that mediation that goes on between these different bodies, with the result of bringing about changes such as the new Viola Desmond $10 bill and the impending Harriet Tubman $10 US bill. I think with that, I'll thank you for your patience, and I'll be happy to continue things in the gallery and turn it into a discussion if there are questions. So thank you for your attention.